Hello and welcome back to Scale Me Down, and we're here at Steve Webb Models celebrating their 35th anniversary with the launch of a very special project. Remember to like and subscribe to support the channel.
Back in the 90s, Steve Webb designed the WEBBiT, which could be seen at many fly-ins and shows throughout the UK.
So we've launched this micro WEBBiT, which is a laser cut kit in a similar vein to these Tony Ray indoor models. It's for 4-channel radio control, and let's see how one goes together. Here I'm removing just the parts we need from the sheets for this step. I cut through the retaining tags using a sharp hobby knife. Next, I'll pin down the wing spars, packing the rear spar up with scrap 32nd balsa. I put the pins to the sides of the delicate parts to avoid splitting them. Now, using a bit of superphatic glue applied with a cocktail stick, I'll slot the ribs into position, ensuring the structure remains flat down to the board. Once this basic structure has cured, I will then add the upper leading edge sheeting. I'll just tack the front of this sheeting using some medium CA, again applied with a cocktail stick, before bending the sheeting down and fixing onto the spar with more CA. Add the trailing edge sheeting using the superphatic glue, lining it up with the tip ribs. Now for the upper centre section sheeting and rib capping strips. I trim these to length off the building surface and fit them with medium CA. With all that set, let's remove the wings from the building board. Using the fine capillary nozzle on the superphatic bottle, I shall now reinforce all the joints. Let's bend up the aileron taut links from the 60mm lengths of wire. Don't forget to add the heat shrink bearing before making the second bend. Ensure that all bends are exactly 90 degrees. The ends that drive the ailerons should be 7mm long and should be dead parallel with the top surface of the ribs, whilst the inboard end hangs dead vertically down. The heat shrink can be glued to the rear spar and into the notches in the ribs using CA. Now let's add the remaining underside sheeting and capping strips, just the same as we did on the top. Roll a gentle curve into the wingtip parts. Be sure to make a left and a right.
Oi, that's my rolling pin.
All that's left to do on the wings now is a thorough all-over sanding, including rounding the leading edge. I've also relieved the lower sheeting and rear spar with the Dremel to allow the aileron taut rods to move. We'll lay out the fuselage sides like this to ensure we make a left and a right. Let's glue on the doublers. These longerons are best fitted with CA, and you might need some partial cuts in the upper ones to make them conform to the shape. Now we can add all the internal frames to one of the fuselage sides, ensuring that they're stood at exactly 90 degrees. Then, when that's set, we can bring the two sides together, making sure they're stood dead square and true. Again, when set, draw in the fuselage and glue together at the tail. You'll need to sand the longerons to get a good fit. The grain on this upper sheeting should go across the fuselage. Leave it overhanging a little, we'll sand it back later. Let's laminate together the firewall components, and whilst we're at it, let's bend up the landing gear wire and sandwich it between the two F4 fuselage plates. I squash mine tightly in a clamp whilst the glue's set. Here I've sanded the upper sheeting back flush and fitted the firewall using 30-minute epoxy. Now will be a good time to bind the receiver, centre the servos and check the motor rotation. And whilst we're at it, let's add the wire Z-bends to the carbon push rods using some heat shrink and a bit of CA. Here the elevator push rod is the shorter of the two and uses the red heat shrink. And also notice that the Z-bend is connected from above the servo horn whilst the rudder Z-bend is connected from below. The servos go in this way round, with the elevator servo on the left with its turret aft, whilst its push rod exits through the right. Ensure the servo arms don't clash. The underside sheeting is added cross grain, apart from this bit at the front. I've left this gap underneath for battery access. And I've drilled and relieved the firewall using a Dremel to clear the motor cabling. Let's lay up the tail surfaces over the plans. Again, I put the pins to the sides, crossing them over the parts to avoid splitting the wood. When they're all set, we can remove them from the plans and give them a quick sanding. The aileron ribs are added directly to the upper aileron skins. The root rib is laminated up from these two parts to leave a little pocket for the aileron torque drive. Finally, we'll add the leading edge. Be sure to make a left and a right aileron. The elevators are joined with the short piece of 1mm carbon rod. We best make sure that they fit into the tailplane and that they're glued nice and flat and true. This little plywood horn fits underneath the right hand elevator. Before we proceed with the final assembly, we need to cover the model, and to do that I'm going to use this lightweight tissue using the damp method. We must also ensure that the tops of the ailerons and elevator are treated with sanding sealer and sanded smooth so that the tape hinges adhere well. Cut the inboard ends of the aileron torque links to protrude 4mm. Hinge the top surfaces of the ailerons using tape and epoxy the torque links to the roots. To connect the torque links to the servo, we'll use little bits of heat shrink like this, like a hinge. Also notice the orientation of the Z-bends for these linkages, as space is at a premium. Now we can add the wings and tail surfaces, ensuring that everything's glued straight and true. After adding the control surfaces, hinging with tape, the wire Z-bends can be joined to the carbon push rods using a small piece of heat shrink. I hope you've enjoyed this easygoing build. And it's now time for some trimming flights before some garden barnstorming. Why not join us in celebrating Steve Webb Models' 35th anniversary by building your own?